In the last video, I showed you how to create a histogram using a combination of tidyverse and ggplot with geom histogram. I want you to recognize that from the code, the main things that are going to change are going to be the data, the variable you pass, the mapping, also depends on the variable. Within geom histogram, you can play with the colors by changing the fill color or the outer border of the bins. You can also change that. You can change the number of bins too. I urge you to play with that line of code. You can modify the different pieces. The other parts that are going to change for every plot we do is the title and the titles for the X and the Y axis. We also will change the scales depending on the type of variable we have, but these pieces probably will stay constant or with minimum change. The next type of chart we're going to learn about is a bar plot, and the function that we're going to use is geom_bar. The type of data, you only pass a single variable and it's an X variable. It's going to be categorical variable or a numerical variable with finite number of values. For example, a ranking that goes from 1 to 10. The description of the chart or the figure is that it summarizes the distribution of the values in a vector or column. So it's similar to the histogram, but with the histogram we had a numerical variable as the X. Here we're going to have a categorical variable or a variable that has a finite number of values. The example I'm going to show you is using the NES dataset, and we're going to look at the climate change question that is envar_GW how. Because this dataset is part of a library within R, we can always look at what that variable is by typing question mark and the name of the dataset in the console. We have the description of the dataset, where it comes from is the American National Election Survey polls, and I am going to look for that variable. So basically this variable is about anthropogenic climate change as it shows here. So we should inspect the variable first because this information doesn't give us as much. I use table because this is a categorical variable, and when I do the table I see that there are 3 levels within this factor or this categorical variable. One is people think it's mostly by human activity, so is climate change happening mostly because of human activity, and we see how many people answer that. Or is it mostly by natural causes, or is it about equal? So if we think about this order, you would think that it's best to have the in-between category in the middle. So we should think about reordering this. And we can do that using tidyverse and mutate. So I say NES is our data set. We save it again. That's why we have equal NES. We have our pipe to say we're continuing. We use mutate from tidyverse. We are just modifying the same variable. That's why we keep the same name. And I simply use the function factor, which takes the variable that we're focused on, the environ_GW how, and it changes the levels. And see how I'm organizing them now. So I keep 1 in the same position, but I'm basically moving this one, the one about equal, to the middle. I can check whether this worked by running table again and seeing that indeed now the order of the levels is changed. Since the level for each category is so long, so you have, each level, especially the one in the middle, is so long, we can change the labels of these levels for each category to make them shorter so that our plot doesn't look so crazy at the bottom. And we're going to do that with scale X discrete. I'll show you that in a bit. One warning that is critical, and I'm going to put in a different color, is that the order of the labels has to match the order of the factor. Let's go through the different lines. As before, we're combining tidyverse with ggplot2. So the first 2 lines are going to be from tidyverse. It's our data, followed by removing any NAs that we may have for that particular variable of interest. Then we do the mapping within ggplot that says that our X variable is going to be the anthropogenic climate change variable from NES. And that's where we start doing ggplot. So again, we use the pipes here, but then from here until here, we use plus signs until the end. The next line uses geom_bar, which is basically the type of chart or figure that I'm showing you today. I'm going to change the colors relative to the histogram. So I'm going to use orange and red for the border. I'm going to also add na.rm equals true, but that's actually not needed because I already did that here. So I could potentially remove that. Size, I'm keeping it equals to 1. The other things I'm changing is the title. I am going to change the scales and the titles of the X and Y axis. But before we do anything, just like I did in the histogram, I'm going to show you if we run the code up to this line. Once I run just the first 4 lines from line 177 to 180, remember I take out the plus sign at the end, and actually I could rerun without the na.rm equal true because I don't need that. A few things are visible that are problematic with the plot. One is that we can't really understand what's happening on the x-axis because the labels are so long they start overlapping with each other. Secondly, our y-axis the scale is not very good because we go from 0 to 1,000 and to 2,000. We don't have a title. I can show you quickly how I can change a few of those things. Let's say if I add the theme black and white and change the title, and we see things are improving slightly but not so much. The title is not centered. We still have issues with the scale. To change the scale, I need to make sure I understand the order of the factor. I look at the order of the factor of the variable of interest, and I see that it goes from mostly human to about equal to then mostly natural. And I'm going to use those same short versions of those levels for my labels. And that's precisely what I do on this line. The first level is mostly by human activity. I'm changing that to just say mostly human. And I'm adding this /n so that it goes to a second line. Mostly is on the first line, human on the second line. Then I'm going to do for the second category, for about equally by human and natural causes, I'm going to call that about on the first line and equal on the second line. And then for mostly natural causes, I'm going to call that mostly on the first line and then natural on the second line. It is super important that we make these labels shorter, but also that we, as the coders, we match the order of the factor to the order of our new labels. So I can't just say about equal, then followed by mostly natural, then followed by mostly human. So it's critical that we know it's matching. It's not like this line is going to tell R the order. You're just simply changing the labels on the axis. So you have to make sure it matches. Once we do that, it's going to make a huge difference. And I'm also looking at changing the scales because with the Y scale, we had issues with that. Just one thing to notice is that for the histogram, we didn't have a scale x discrete because we had a numeric variable on the x-axis, so we had scale x continuous. So that's one main difference that we have relative to the histogram. And then I'm just changing the x lab and the y lab. I'm going to copy and paste it here, run it, and we see a big difference, right? We now see mostly human, about equal, mostly natural, and our scale is much different. Things that I would like you to do on your own to play with the different options is to change the colors. You can also potentially play with the scale if you want it, but most of it you're going to play with the colors and just the design part of it. You could try the scale discrete and removing the slash and then the n and see how the graph looks.